Hello and welcome to another episode of Brand Retro. Today on the podcast, we have Zack Slingsby. Zack is a writer, short film creator, and founder of Human Factor Media. Human Factor Media is an award-winning branded storytelling company that has worked with leading brands and publishers to create videos that people actually want to watch. Zack, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Let's start out. Tell me a little bit about Human Factor Media and kind of what you guys do.
Sure. We're a small team. Been around about 4.5 years, maybe a little less. We are based in New York and Nashville. We have production teams in both cities. We're very focused on what we take on. We're doing usually in 4 to 5 projects at a time. We've gotten to work with some big brands in the last few years to tell stories. LG and Planet Fitness and New York Post. We have won some accolades from film festivals, and we have a vast network of creative talent around the country. So when projects come up, we're thinking about it as how do we bring in real creatives, real proven artists to help tell stories and create videos. And we think about videos a little bit differently in the sense that, we're trying to push our brands and the collaborators that we work with to treat their pages as a stage. We want them to be making stuff that you wouldn't be shocked if one day you found some iteration of it on Netflix or Hulu, some streaming platform. We think that brands are very much in the entertainment business. So we don't think of the narrative value as an afterthought. We think that's the point. So.
Yeah. So doing a little prep work for this episode, I looked at your guys' website, and from everything I saw, it just looked like top-notch quality. And one of the things that I've probably said on this podcast 50 times, but I definitely tell my clients this, is that you don't necessarily have to spend $1 million to look like $1 million brand. And I truly believe that. I think a lot of times clients and customers get overwhelmed with the idea of, well, how much is this going to cost me? And they lose sight of the end result, where in looking at your guys' stuff and looking at kind of the backstory of what you do, I can tell you're a purposeful, purpose-driven brand. So tell me a little bit about how do you bridge that gap between purpose, client expectation, and then delivering something, like you said, that could be seen on Netflix or some kind of a high quality streaming platform.
Yeah, no, there's a lot in there. And so it's all accurate. You do not have to spend Hollywood budgets to create compelling stories. That's true. And that's more true than ever. Technology's kind of democratizing at the same rate that the number of people entering the market is increasing. So those two things are kind of colliding, and we're the beneficiaries of that. I mean, my production knowledge before 4 years ago was way less than whatever yours is now, I promise. So I was like, I had to learn quickly, and luckily I teamed up with people who were seasoned in this field. But, my background is in writing and in stories. And I saw that there were many great brands that were making content that was indistinguishable from entertainment narrative, right? It was totally just to immerse you in the storytelling experience. And the sales they were not sales. And so I told a friend, I said, do you think there's a market for this? I mean, we could just go to brands and try to make videos for them. And at first he was like, oh, you mean branded content? And I had never heard the term. And he said, and I was like, well, what is branded content? And he's like, well, it's when brands make videos and they're not trying to sell you. I was like, yeah, well, okay, well, we'll do that. Why don't we do that? And so I looked into what branded content was, and in 90% of cases, it would still be thinly veiled sales videos. They are, but they're, here's how, it's not trying to sell you the printer, but here's how the printer works, and here's why it can help you. So a lot of the time, that area is still filled with stuff that is very, still trying to close the deal pretty fast. It's not generally narrative driven. Now, having said that, there are obviously tremendous exceptions to that. And I think more and more brands are figuring out that they have a platform, and they have a way to be poetic or to try to be resonating with their audiences. So, and I think this goes to, you had a big question. The second part of it was, how should they kind of imagine themselves in that role? Is that right?
Well, just, the idea is that I think when a brand or a client, when they go seeking a service, right, they kick enough tires where they go, oh man, I don't know if I can afford 10 grand, 20 grand, or whatever it is, because they put themselves in that financial mindset. And for me, or at least how I communicated to them, is figure out what you want the end result to be first and what you want that to look like, and then work it backwards so that you can figure out how to get there, what the deliverables are, because it's not about being cheap, but it's about maintaining your expectation and maintaining your vision, and then just figuring out how to get there. So in working with brands that are more purpose driven versus money driven, I think the relationship and the narrative on how to get to that place is a lot easier. No offense to the other companies out there, but the money driven companies that base their decisions off sales and, it's just really about the almighty dollar. That's always a barrier then that the client has to somehow get past, because we're not talking about the same thing. If we're both talking about purpose, I think the conversation will get us there regardless. Where if one of us is talking about service and the other one's talking about finance, it's a bumpy road to get there if you ever get there.
Well, Mike, what's an example? You can make it up. Doesn't have to be a client, but of a service driven or a purpose driven brand that you're like, all right, we're all going in the same direction, and you can see their growth potential. I mean, what's versus a brand that's just, you don't have to name specific ones, but just a hypothetical, what would be a purpose driven mission?
So for me, let me fall on my own sword. I don't know if this is a great example, but I'll let you tell me. For me, when I create collateral and content for CyberDogs, it's all about kind of pulling the covers back. It's about giving them an introduction of who Mike is, who the brand is, what we're like to work. We try to give them as much, inclination of the experience as we can through our branded content, through our brand videos, instead of creating one of these videos that is about price or about selling a hard service, because the services we provide and the way we do things, that will take care of itself if they want to work with us, if they feel compelled by the brand to say, I don't know if I need that, but I do need marketing help. I want to work with those guys. The money and the services piece to me will take care of itself. So I guess the point is, in my own content, I only talk about the brand. I talk about the experience. I talk about the relationship. I talk about all the things that live under the covers that they would never know unless they worked with us. So my goal was always to take those things, put them on top of the covers, so it will entice them to work with us.
Yeah. And how do you feel that, so growth is not, it's obviously the goal, but it's also sort of a byproduct.
It's a byproduct, but I also believe it's inherent to some degree. I mean, we have to be smart. We have to think about the business. We have to, we obviously have to have that component exist, but if you build your brand, your direction, your mission, your purpose in a way that kind of feeds that byproduct, then you don't have to put the byproduct as the number one priority.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
So even from an agency standpoint, I mean, any of my clients can attest to this. I don't sell anything. Like, I meet with clients and we talk about needs, pain points, and solutions. That's all we talk about. We don't talk about money or selling anything until they go, yeah, I want to do this. Because for me, I mean, I'm not a used car salesman. It's not always about the price for me either. Sometimes it's about wanting to work with a certain brand. Sometimes, I've had plenty of a nonprofit scenario where I was so moved or, inspired by what they're doing, where I just said, I want to do it for nothing. So at that point, price is out the window. So in every conversation with my clients, the price and the cost is the last thing we talk about.
Those nonprofits get you. They're like telling the story and they're like, oh, here we go. We're going to do it.
Yep.
Sometimes it's so good. Yeah. Well, I think there are parallels to all that in the branded entertainment world. And I think that, the earliest modes, so the commercial as a concept is young, right? Like, it's a young media. We didn't, 41, first commercial ever aired on national television was for Bulova Watch Company. I was seen by about 4,000 people in New York. It cost them $9 to make it and air it, or $9 to make it, $4 to air, something like that. Right. And it's pretty famous now, but it was just a map of the United States. And it said, U.S. is on Bulova time. I might be mispronouncing it. But it was they just had to tell you that watches were out there. And so advertising has this hangover today of the essentials. What is it? Why is it good? How much does it cost? And the speed of that and the hyper relevancy of information from a brand is something that we constantly have to wrestle if we're saying, look, let's make a 5-part web series about, telling a story about, some set of initiatives that you guys have nothing to do with what you're making. And, we're having to go against the grain of all of our education up to this point, what advertising is for. And it's funny. I found this out recently. This is actually cool. So the earliest advertisements can be traced back to the Song Dynasty. So they go thousands and thousands of years, and some of them are strikingly similar to what you would read in a newspaper print ad. And they're like, fine needles, very sharp, very effective, around the corner, and they wrote them on rock, pointed an arrow to where you should go. So they had to be literal, and they had to be specific, and they had to be credible, because they had so little access to, certain resources. And in some cases, they had very little access to anything. So all of this specificity was born out of nature. And so now we're at a place where we do not struggle to access products, right? We have, everything is literally click away, and usually 6 to 12 hours away from Amazon. And so the era of differentiating according to product features, certainly I think is past us. And now we're in a place where, how do we entertain someone or captivate someone on a human level? And I think it's an evolution. I think it's an evolution in brand presence. And so, that's a certain parallel track of commercials. But then on the parallel track, you have soap operas were invented by soap companies to sell soap. So that's an entertainment medium that came out of commerce. Then you have the Colgate Comedy Hour, was in the 50s. You have this history of brands finding ways to get in front of people in a non-confrontational mode, in a non-intrusive mode. So in some ways, this is not new, this idea of branded entertainment, right? But it's definitely more widespread than ever. And I think as society gets noisier, it's more valuable than ever.
Yeah. And I think the idea of branded content and kind of how brand, as a topic has kind of rose the ranks of priority is because it was all getting baked in anyway. You think about branding, even back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever it was, it existed, but nobody talked about it as branding. They just talked about it as advertising. If you've ever watched Mad Men or a show like that, the idea of brand being a standalone topic was never really, brought up in that way. It was always a byproduct or an inclusion of something else. So it was always there. So even the concept of branding being kind of this standalone idea is relatively new, which is, I think, what you and I are both talking about, is that anybody can tap into that. You don't necessarily need a huge budget, a huge team, you can tap into that brand, connect it to your authenticity, connect it back to your services, connect it back to whatever it is you're trying to do as a company, and really make a unique impact for you and your customers. And it's cool that, that you guys are kind of attacking it in that way, because I think there's so many other alternatives and other companies that don't, that I think I don't want to say the little guy, because it doesn't just affect the little guy, but I think for the people that view it that way and understand the importance of it, I think it's a huge factor for them. And I think it speeds up the success process tremendously.
Well, I think you're correct. And I'm motivated to think that way, but I do.
You're biased, but you can certainly jump all over that, because it's true.
It's also selfish for us. It's a selfish motivation, because as creatives, we think this is a marketplace for creative. We think this is we picked this because we think, most of the people that we work with, their backgrounds are non-marketing. My background is non-marketing, as I said, and most of them, they wouldn't know, put them in an advertising boardroom. They wouldn't know the lingo. They wouldn't know what to, one of them said, we were talking about something and someone mentioned ROI. Someone was like, what's ROI? So it's not it's not like, these are not profit motivated people in a sense. I mean, they are, for obvious reasons. They're living in capitalist economy like anyone else, but in the sense that they don't look at stories as, how do we connect this tissue, in fact, to this quarterly earnings. They look at it as, how are we actually going to resonate with it?
Yeah.
The brand folks can draw the rest of the map.
Yep. So what's that process look like for you? So when you sit down with a potential prospect client, you don't have to tell us who, but if it's LG versus, New York Post, whoever it is, what's your angle on how to get them started, to help them understand it, to see it from or through the lens of human factor media?
Yeah. So we start out with the ideas. We come in with a presentation with usually somewhere between 2 and 3 concepts that we think would be very effective from their platform. And, we'll do that. We just do that exercise. We enjoy doing it. It comes to us. We like to ideate. We have tons of ideas. So that it's not like a fee to sit down with us or anything. If we think we could help, we start with that process. And then that'll tell us usually pretty quickly if we're met somewhat goals. And a good chunk of that meeting oftentimes is figuring out whether this strategy makes sense. Because it's weird. It's a trend, but it's also novel to many brands, many established players as well as. So we're coming in with the concepts. We're oftentimes then defending the concepts 5 minutes later. And then we see if we have some way to move forward. And then we create an engagement based on one video or a series of videos or, some plan and sometimes it'll span brands more than for a while, it'll span a year of content. How do we want to create?
Yeah. Without,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I could share a presentation, and it's probably not helpful. And also, we would have to probably blot out, I don't know, logos and stuff. So we'll do it next time. But yeah, it would be.
So without giving away the secret sauce, so to speak, what do you believe is your unique approach? What makes human factor media different?
I don't think it's a secret. I think we reverse engineer what we think people would actually want to watch. I think we start with if you were surfing a YouTube channel and you saw this, would you want to watch? What would you watch and what would you skip? Most content is skipped. 95% of YouTube reels are skipped after the 5-second mark. $20 billion will be wasted in skipped ads. So it's this content explosion. So there's great stuff everywhere, but also at the same time, there's just such this tense frustration with thing that is disruptive or engendered it. So we just try to come at it as we made a pitch this week for a very famous personality, talk show personality who has a platform, streaming platform. And we had to gear the pitch toward moms. And so the question is, what do moms want to see? What's entertaining to them? And so that's conversation starts at the level of your personal life. It starts at with the moms that I have a wife, she was mother. And so, you're doing this kind of literary investigation of stories surrounding your own life, figuring out if there's any thread that become a theme for a series. And,
yeah, it's it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's interesting.
I was going to say, I'm sure it's what you do, right? It's got to be similar to how you guys approach it.
Yeah, kind of like you'd mentioned when we first hopped on, is just the synergies between the two brands. Is that the word I always use is the relatability of it. So I think in marketing and branding, I think the word authenticity gets thrown around a lot. It's a great word, but it also gets stretched out to the point where people don't even know what it means. And for me, the authenticity is important, but for me, it means relatability. So when you're creating a brand, you're creating content, your brand storytelling, whatever it is, if there is authenticity baked in and there's real components and real experiences and real emotions and these different things that connect back to what it is you do, there's a really good chance that a listener, a viewer, or somebody watching is going to go, oh my God, I felt like that too, or I want to feel like that, or I want to be like that, or I felt like that. That relatability is what sucks them in and makes them want to experience your brand or your show or whatever it is. So I'm picking up what you're laying down and the fact that it's about relatability. For me, that's the word I always use.
Resonance, relatability, the point of the point of identification. But this difference is whether it's motivated or whether it's organic to a story. Because
yes,
everyone in an advertising room would say the same thing we're saying right now, right?
Correct.
The boardroom, they would say, how do we find we're going to put that on the billboard, then the guy's going to be wearing the watch and he's going to hold it up. So it's the same inspiration, but I think the vehicle for the execution is what makes it.
Yeah. And what I would add to that is relatability should come naturally. Like it can be intentional that we want to be authentic. We want to put this stuff in there, but to your point, you get a boardroom full of marketers and they're going to try to figure out how to solve the problem, like crack the code of relatability. And it's like, it's not a code to be cracked. It's either there or it isn't.
Right.
So if you just if you're just authentic about it, you create your narrative. If it's relatable, those people they'll be magnetized to it.
Yes. It's a long quote that I can't remember, but that Emerson has on this, which is exactly, that people are compelled by basically hearing the secrets of their lives repeated in some strange format. And you have it's so magical when it happens, and it's so improbable. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I always do that. And comics, comedians, I think, are genius. They'll find some way to give you your own experience through the lens of some absurd observation. And that's what we aspire to do. I mean, we're getting there. I don't know that we're working on it. I don't know, not every piece of content hits it out of the park, but it's like, that's the ambition. And Walker Percy is one of my favorite novelists. And he said that the problem with science is it can't tell us anything about the individual. And he said, in literature is actually the science of it. And so that's an amazing thing, like true storytelling actually can become a science of human beings at the individual level, at the most hyper personalized level. So that's the aim, but it's a long journey.
Well, I appreciate your guys' approach, and honestly, anybody that can, kind of come to the table with the goal of redefining brand storytelling and kind of coming at it from a different angle, I'm always ready to champion those people, because I feel like in marketing, there's so many traditional pitfalls that marketers fall into that are not helping the customers. And to come at it differently, to come at it from a relatable and authentic place is only going to give that customer a better end result.
Well, I love what you guys say about novelty and nostalgia, and those kind of rediscover that original wonder, that got you excited about something, or that brands themselves were once excited about. And I find that to be really interesting. Like, business people tend to be, I don't know what your experience is. My experience is that business people tend to be very, they tend to be visionaries about one or two very specific domains, and then deadly pragmatists about everything else. Like they've spent all their idealism and wonder and hope on these areas, and then everything else is very pragmatic. It's just number and answers, and better answers and optimization. So you could see how in that, these esoteric strategies that we're talking about that maybe a little bit more romantic or long form, or or realistic, that would be something that it wouldn't be the first tool that a real serious effect.
Right. Well, and I think it's about remembering and recalibrating back to that place where you kind of started out, that place you fell in love with what you're doing. You fell in love with the brand. You fell in love with the idea, the vision, whatever it is, because along the way, along the entrepreneurial road, you'll get a lot of great advice. You'll get people chirping in your ear about, hey, you should do this, or it happens all day, every day. Then you have to be able to filter that stuff as it pertains to your own path. When you get off that path, sometimes it can be a good thing, but sometimes it can pull you so far away from why you were doing it in the first place that you'll lose time and you'll forget and you'll lose your way, to the point where all of a sudden 2 years down the road, you're like, I don't know why, but all of a sudden I hate my job, or I hate what I'm doing, or how did we get so far off track? And it just happens over time. So what we always talk about, and in the purpose of, in the underbelly of this podcast, is about maintaining a hold on that. Put your thumb on that thing that got you excited way back in the day, and never take that thumb off. You can still take the advice, and you can still step off the path from time to time. You can evolve however you want to evolve. But if you lose that thing, if you lose that passion, and if you fall out of love with the idea, you got to figure out how to get it back, or re-fall in love with it again, because business and this whole process of entrepreneurship will consume you. And by the time you figure it out, it's too late. So paying attention to that is hugely important in my book. But
how long have you guys been around?
I've been in and around the industry for 25 plus years, but CyberDogs has been around we are at our 7th year. And
do you feel like you took detours that had that effect, and then you had to kind of course correct?
Yeah, I mean, and that's completely natural. I definitely have, but I actually bake it into my plan every year at least once, it's actually probably more than once, but at least once, I will sit down once a year and I will box out a number of weeks, days, whatever it takes to recalibrate everything that we're doing and to decide if this is a logical evolution of, or did we get off track? Because if we're off track, or if it, I don't know why we started doing this, but it doesn't feel natural, and I don't know how this fits into what we were doing, then we rethink it and we potentially get rid of it or whatever it is. But to kind of fall on my own sword and to be authentic to my customers, I bake that into my annual plan every year because I think it's that important. And I have, it's probably to the point of nausea for my team because they have to hear this stuff over and over again. But we are very dedicated to the idea of being different. We are committed to this idea that we do not want to be traditional. We want to continue to do what we're doing from a brand perspective and do it the way we want to do it because that's what makes it fun for us. I mean, entrepreneurship is supposed to be fun, right? So we want to maintain that for ourselves as much as we can.
That's really cool. That's cool. It comes through.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So Zach, tell us a little bit about where they can learn more about Human Factor Media, how they can follow you, and kind of, how can they get a hold of you if they want to do some work?
Yeah, man. So humanfactormedia.co. That CO has gotten us in trouble. Expect the comp. No end. See it. Humanfactormedia.co is our portfolio there. Get in touch with our accolades and clients, etc. So you can reach out through the website, or you can email me directly, Zack, Z-A-C-K, at humanfactormedia.co. We're launching some original series and stuff this year too, to keep an eye out for, also through our site. So that's it.
Zach, I appreciate the time and great job, and we'll have you on again sometime.
Thank you, man. Great to hear about what you guys do too. And man.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
If you'd like to learn more about CyberDogs, share your thoughts, or even ask a specific question about this episode or the brand Retro Mindset, contact me directly at mike@cyberdogsmarketing.com.